Look, it's me. What? Looking good. What is going on, guys? So today we are back with another video. Today we're actually going to be looking into Vespiquen. Yeah, so all weekend long, I'm pretty sure Giraffe Rig was next, and then like out of nowhere, like Vespiquen took over, and I've been really slacking on showing you guys what's upcoming, so I will try to remember to do that at the end of this video. If I don't do that in editing, I might as well just punch myself in the face. So Vespiquen here is a bug and flying type Pokemon maxing out at 2005. That is at level 40 with 15s across the board. But to get into the Great League, we can use a 0-1 attack, 14 defense, 13 stamina at level 29 to actually hit 1498, which is perfect. Then we do have, according to my spreadsheets and all the numbers that I have ran, Vespiquen is actually 46th in bulk, but 11th in stat product, which was really weird. It just seems like that's kind of awkward, but I mean that's what it was. So okay. Now of course all of that does come from our base stats here, which is a 149 for attack, 190 on defense, and 172 in stamina, which is actually like, that's great. That's a great spread. Low attack, high defense, high stamina, high TDO. Pretty freaking sweet. So we're looking pretty good already up top here. But let's actually start to look into these moves and actually see how these go. So, starting with our fast moves here, we do have Bug Bite and Poison Sting. Bug Bite's just going to be objectively better in literally every scenario. So, 3 energy per turn for Bug Bite, 3 damage for Bug Bite. After stab, it does get bumped up to 3.6. For Poison Sting here, we do have a 3 energy per turn, so we're matching our Bug Bite, but we only have a 1.5 damage per turn and no stab, so it's literally just a worse Bug Bite. Definitely want to go with Bug Bite here. Now moving into our charge moves, we do have Bug Buzz, Power Gem, and X Scissor. An interesting thing that I noticed in the simulations is actually if we wanted to actually say, well, maybe X Scissor isn't my cup of tea, I don't like the efficiency, I'd rather have something like Bug Buzz, which is a lot more efficient, plus Bug Buzz still has, you know, stab benefits. If it were a choice between Bug Buzz and X Scissor, and we were saying we definitely want to have Power Gem, what I actually noticed is that X Scissor works a lot better when shields are up. You actually start to win more matchups when shields are a problem that you have to overcome. But if shields are gone, Bug Buzz is by far like way better. So that's something interesting that I noticed that you may want to keep in mind if you are trying to build out a Vespiquen and possibly kind of conflicted on the movesets. But to figure out what we're actually going to use today, let's go through these really fast. So Bug Buzz here is 60 energy to fire for 90 damage at a 1.5, does get bumped up to 108, and a 1.8 on the damage per energy ratio there. Power Gem for the exact same 60 energy, we get 80 damage at a 1.33, no stab benefits there of course. X Scissor for 35 energy, we get 45 damage at a 1.29. After stab, it does get bumped up to the 54 with a 1.54 on our damage per energy ratio. For the purposes of this video, because we do focus a lot more on shield scenarios and shielding and stuff like that, I did feel like we probably want to go with X Scissor and Power Gem. X Scissor really does help out with a lot of the speed that we need to keep up with other Pokemon in the cup, aka Vigoroth and other things of the sort. And Power Gem is really there because one, it's going to be a decent neutral move up against most of the meta, and then it's also going to help just completely destroy the other bug and flying type Pokemon that we're going to run into. So Power Gem definitely makes a lot of sense. But I still strongly feel like Bug Buzz is definitely not to be overlooked. It definitely could work out on the right team if you're not as focused on shields. If you already have like crazy amounts of shield busters on your team, then possibly you might want to run Bug Buzz for the extra oomph in your team. Just Power Gem and Bug Buzz may actually work out pretty well for you. But that's up to you. So like I said, let's actually get into our shielding situations here. We're actually going to start with a 0 versus 0 for the entire cup. And that's actually going to be a 52.2%, which is okay. I mean, we're definitely hitting over that 50% mark, which is what I like to see there. Next, we're moving on to our 2 versus 0, which is where we have 2 shields, but our opponent doesn't have any shields this time. We actually end up winning 96.3% of those. But I'm not too concerned about those. I'm actually wondering which Pokemon still flat out end up beating us even though we have complete shield advantage. And probably if you thought about it, it's not too surprising here. the Rock Boys, even Geodude, both Graveler and Golem, all three of those are actually going to be able to take us out. No matter what we do, no matter how many shields we have, we still end up losing to those. Next, we do have our 0 versus 2, which is where I don't have any shields this time, but my opponent actually has both shields. We actually end up winning 14.2% of those, which I'm actually kind of concerned about the ones that we beat here, considering that we do actually have no shields, but our opponent has 2. I'd like to know which Pokemon I can still end up beating. We actually end up winning 14.2% of those, and a lot of the Pokemon that show up here are the grass types. Some of the less bulkier grass types definitely show up here, and then some of the bug types actually do start to appear here as well, but in general, it's going to be the grass types and a couple of the bugs sprinkled in here and there. The ones that we can really hit with that power gem are really going to have a hard time, or if they're just less bulky or just really finicky or anything like that, the bug types are going to kind of be weary there as well. Then in our last shield scenario, we do have the 2 versus 2, which is where I have both shields and my opponent has both shields. We actually end with a 67.2% in that scenario, which is pretty nice. And what that actually ends up telling me is that the 67.2 definitely means that we prefer to open with our Vespiquen rather than close. Statistically, we will win more matches if both me and my opponent have both shields, whereas if we didn't have any shields whatsoever, we'd definitely be losing more matches than we won. Now let's actually go over to PvPoke. We're actually going to look a little bit into these Pokemon that we're going up against inside the entire cup here. What we're going to do is we're going to build our Vespiquen Bug Bite, Power Gem, X Scissor, just like we talked about before. We are going to have one shield for ourselves, jump over to Multi-Battle here at the top, run it with a Jungle Cup, meaning the entire Jungle Cup. We're going to have one shield for them as well to give the most evenness between both of us. Once we hit battle, boom, you can see with a 1 versus 1 shield scenario, we do have a 57.5% win ratio, which is pretty much in line between our 0 versus 0 and our 2 versus 2, which is to be expected. Starting off with the Pokemon inside the cup, we're actually going to take a look at them type by type, which in first, I just usually go in alphabetical order. First, we have the bug type here, and as you can see at the very top, Pinecoat, Anorith, Volbeat, Illumise, and Pinsir are our top 5 easiest matchups. Once we get closer to that 500 though, you can see Armaldo, Beautifly, we do tie up against ourselves of course, and then Fortress and Scizor right around the tie mark there. So Beautifly and Armaldo should be difficult matchups that we still end up winning, while Fortress and Scizor should be the matchups that are difficult, but we still end up losing, so really close there. Once we get all the way down to the bottom, you can see that Yanma, Yanmega, Beedrill, Masquerain, and Ninjask are our worst possible matchups. They are the hardest Pokemon for Vespiquen to actually tackle here. Moving on to the electric types here, you can see that we have Manectric and Ampharos there at the very top. Both of those are actually wins, but then outside of that, we don't have any wins after that. So we do go into Raikou, Luxio, and Alolan Raichu being the 3 hardest matchups that we're still going to end up losing, while all the way down at the bottom you can see the Rock Boys making a grand appearance here. Geodude, Golem, and Graveler being the worst 3 possible Pokemon to go up against, which does make a lot of sense, considering we carry that super duper weakness to the rock typing here. Next, moving on to the grass typings, we do have Cherim, Lileep, and Sunflora at the very top for our easiest matchups inside the grass. Once we scroll all the way down here, we can see, surprisingly, we only end up losing to 1 Pokemon, which is Cradily, which will more than likely, let's double check here, be utilizing some rock type moves. Yeah, it does have Stone Edge. If it can penetrate through that Stone Edge, yeah, it is going to do some massive damage. It actually only ends up winning with 13 health though, so it is rather close. The next Pokemon that you bring in could have a pretty easy time with it. Snover, Tangrowth, and Grovyle there are the 3 hardest matchups in the grass typing that we still will end up winning. So the grass typing is looking really, really strong, but that's to be expected considering that we do have an insane amount of damage towards the grass typing with our bug type moves, and we're just gonna generally do pretty good up against those. Last typing here, we do have the normal typing, which as you can see, Slacking, Ursaring, Kangaskhan actually showing up as the 3 easiest matchups. Once we get down into these 500s though, you can see we do have ties up against both Pidgeot and Staraptor, with Chansey and Spinda actually being kind of close matchups that we still end up winning, while Snorlax and Miltank are actually the 2 that are really close, but we still end up losing. All the way down at the bottom, you can see we do have a loss up against Noctowl, Porygon Z, which I'm sure is utilizing a rock type fast move, yep. And then we do have Staravia and Swallow. I would say the Porygon Z is a little bit jaded there. It's probably one off in a million that you're probably going to see that exact matchup using Vespiquen in this 1 versus 1 shield scenario. But I guess if you do have that rock type Porygon Z, you could do okay with it. But anyways, Noctowl, Staravia, Swellow, definitely going to be the 3 hardest matchups for you there, which is no surprise considering that we do have that weakness to the flying typing. So now that we've talked about the entire cup, let's actually look a little bit further into the 22 meta-relevant Pokemon as defined by PvPoke here. If we start off with our shields, we're actually going to be looking at a 0 versus 0 situation, which is actually a 45.5% win ratio, which is okay. We're not quite at that 50% mark, but we're still kind of like really close. We only have, I think it's a draw that ends up happening that prevents us from getting to that 50%, which that draw should technically be ourselves. So 50% off technicality maybe. Next we move into our 1 versus 0, which is actually a 68.2%, which is decently strong. I wouldn't say that's the best that we've seen, but that's still pretty strong. Our 0 versus 1 is actually a 13.6%, which here again, that's actually a lot better than I expected. Being said it is over 10% is always great. Then we do have the 1 versus 1, which is as far as we go here, is the 40.9% win ratio that we really like to see there. So here again, it's kind of a weird thing between Bug Buzz and X-Scissor. In the cup scenario, we do really well with X-Scissor. When shields are a big problem and, you know, we need to break through some shields, X-Scissor is great. But in the meta, it seems like it almost flops, because in the 1 versus 1 we do worse than if we have a no shield scenario. So interesting. But let's actually look into the meta here. We're going to jump back into PvPoke here. You can see we do have Bug Bite, Power Gem, X-Scissor with 1 shield for ourselves. We are going to do a custom group this time, quick fill it with the entire Jungle Cup meta. Give them 1 shield as well for the evenness, and once we hit battle, you can see we do end up with that 40.9% that we were talking about. But let's actually take a look through some of these Pokemon. To no one's surprise, the grass types generally are going to show up here at the top. So we do have Breloom, Ivysaur, Victreebel, Venusaur, Heracross, Scizor, Venomoth, Vigoroth. Yeah, that's a big one. And then Fortress actually showing up as our last win there. Of course, we do tie up against ourselves, but then we actually have a loss up against Lantern. Okay, I'd like to actually see here, because it does prefer the Water Gun, I want to see if we do Charge Beam, if it has like anything crazy happening here. Yeah, it really just destroys us. Either way, Lantern is going to be a pretty hard matchup. Credillia, of course, Magneton, Magnezone, both of those make a lot of sense. Scyther, Masquerain, Beedrill, Raichu, Pidgeot, Noctowl, and then of course the Rock Boys there at the very bottom. So the thing with Vespiquen is that it has a very clear role, in my opinion. It definitely looks like it needs to be all for the grass. It needs to be just heavily targeted towards taking out grass types, and then having a kind of like a soft counter to some of the bug types. But it's very easily countered inside of the electric types are really good up against it, and those normal flying types are really good up against it. And then you have the Rock Boys, which are going to be like super hard counters. So it does have a pretty clear role, and I think if that's what your team needs, I definitely feel like Vespiquen is great at doing that role. But you kind of have to watch out for the weaknesses that you do carry, because when you get stuck in a situation where you're going to get hit by some rocks, you're definitely going to go down really fast. So that is actually going to be it for today, guys. I definitely think that Vespiquen is a very strong contender this month. I feel like we just did a video on Scyther and Masquerain, and honestly, as much as I hate to say it, I do want to say that Vespiquen will probably outperform Scyther in most scenarios, but Scyther is definitely more attack driven, and that's kind of like a playstyle all in its own. If that's kind of your thing, then Scyther may make a lot more sense for you. Vespiquen's a little bit more defensive, just kind of like how Masquerain was. So there's that. But anyways, that is actually going to be it for today, guys, because I'm not going to forget, let's throw up what we've got coming up next. And of course, you know, we do have our ending section. I've been saying that outro line for like 6-7 months now. Oh no, close to 8 months now. So it's kind of a hard habit to break. But anyways, Well, you've made it to the end of the video. Thank you guys so much for hanging out. Thank you so much for watching. Of course, if you do have any ideas for content, please drop them down in the comments below. I'll be happy to look at those for you guys. Of course, if you want to join my personal Discord, get to talking to some people that have a similar outlook as myself, definitely go down into the description, join that Discord there. If you want to become a Patreon, there is a link down in the description for that as well. My outlook on Patreon is I don't want to put anything behind a paywall. This is what I do. You guys get every bit of what I make, and I don't want to limit that to someone else just because they can't pay for something. I didn't think that was fair. If you want to be a Patreon, just know that you're literally doing it from the kindness of your heart, wanting to support me, and I appreciate that. You don't even understand how much. There are a couple of other options if you would like to join the community here on YouTube. It's very similar to a Twitch-like subscription where it's a dollar amount per month depending on where you live. And then that monthly fee basically gets funneled to me every month. And you do get a couple of special perks here on YouTube, like some badges and some emojis or whatever. I honestly think those are only for live streaming. So that may not be the way that most people want to go, but that's an option if you want to. Other than that, if you'd like to follow me on Twitter, that link is actually going to be down in the description as well. And until our next video, guys, that should be it. Thank you so much for watching and hanging out. And until our next video, I will catch you then.